mission. The unusual thing about this particular flight and this crew is that they will be flying up to the International Space Station and docking on the same day that they launch. Typically, these crews take about 2 days to get up to the orbiting complex, but they're going to accelerate things in a maneuver that was proven through the past few Progress unmanned cargo vehicles that have visited the space station. And this team will get up to the International Space Station just a few hours after they launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Here's a look at our coverage for Thursday. 2:30 p.m. Central Time. We'll have live views from the launch pad leading up to the launch, which will take place at 3:43 p.m. Central Time. We will return at 8:30 p.m. Central Time with docking coverage. Docking will take place a little more than an hour after that at 9:32 p.m. Central Time. This team is going to be docking with the Poisk module, part of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. And then our third and final coverage will begin at 10:30 p.m. Central Time. We'll bring you live views of the hatch opening between the two crews. So quite a busy day for this crew, quite a busy day for us here on NASA Television. But it should be quite a remarkable flight to see this team launch and dock within just a few hours of each other, going from Kazakhstan to the International Space Station in a matter of hours. So again, the clocks here in Mission Control continuing to count backward, 1 hour and 43 minutes until the release of Dragon. That release time at 5:56 a.m. Central Time, 6:56 a.m. Eastern Time. That is 10:56 for our friends over there in Greenwich Mean Time or in the UK. That is 3:56 there at the landing zone just off the coast of Baja California. Today's deorbit burn, 10:42 a.m. Central Time, plus 33 seconds. Splashdown, 11:34 and 56 seconds. Those are both Central Time. As we talked about, the day delay in today's activities actually benefited us quite a bit because Dragon is going to be splashing down a little bit closer to the coast than would have taken place yesterday. That is good news for the recovery teams. It is also good news for the science that is coming back. But all of the recovery teams are on station. The seas, which were quite a bit choppy and severe at the end of last week and over the weekend, have stabilized quite a bit. And everything should be good to go for Dragon's return later on this morning. There's an entire fleet of vehicles out there awaiting the arrival of Dragon in the water. SpaceX uses a 100-foot boat equipped with an A-frame that is used to lift the spacecraft out of the water. There's a 90-foot crew boat for telemetry operations, monitoring the vehicle as it comes back in, and two 24-foot rigid hull inflatable boats that carry the people and perform the recovery operations. They have about a dozen SpaceX engineers and technicians, as well as a 4-person dive team that helps stabilize the spacecraft. Once Dragon's in the water, they will secure it and then place it on the deck of the ship and begin the process of bringing it back into port. As we mentioned, a lot of the science that's inside Dragon, once it gets back to port, will be immediately handed over to NASA at the airport. It will be a NASA plane on station awaiting the handover of the science, and then it will immediately fly back to Houston for immediate processing. So quite a fast turnaround for those scientific experiments that are coming back home today. The rest of the cargo that's inside Dragon will stay inside, safely tucked away. It'll be trucked back to McGregor, Texas, which is where SpaceX has a facility. And then there will be a NASA team on hand there later on this week to take over that cargo as well. Here's a view of what we've already seen here on NASA Television this morning as Dragon gets backed away from the International Space Station. It will perform a series of 3 departure burns to take it away from the International Space Station complex. It will begin the process of re-entry soon after that deorbit burn takes place at 10:42, and then again splashdown occurring at 11:34 a.m. Central Time this morning. Here's a look at the layout of the station. You see Columbus there on the left, the Kibo laboratory, the Japanese laboratory there on the right. There is where Dragon is currently berthed to the International Space Station on the bottom side of Harmony. You see the Tranquility node back there at the back and the Destiny laboratory there, sort of in the center of your screen. This will also be the home of the orbital Cygnus later on this year. That company getting ready to perform a test flight coming up in April from the Wallops Flight Facility. Both Dragon and Cygnus, and their two companies, SpaceX and Orbital Sciences, participated in NASA's Commercial Orbital Transportation Services program. This was a revolutionary program that the agency undertook to create the capability for these two U.S. cargo vehicles. After the space shuttle retired, we lost our ability to both take up and return large amounts of cargo from U.S. companies and U.S. carriers and U.S. launch sites. So instead of NASA designing its own vehicles or having contract teams do it under specific direction from the agency, NASA basically set requirements saying, okay, the agency needs this amount of capability to take up this amount of cargo on this kind of schedule, and these two companies went off and with the help of NASA, both financially and technically, designed these two very different vehicles. Both Cygnus and SpaceX have advantages. SpaceX, of course, can bring home scientific experiments. Cygnus, on the other hand, can carry up quite a bit of cargo, but can also pack it full of trash and bring it back home, which sounds routine, but trash is an incredibly important aspect of the International Space Station. Both HTV, ATV, and Progress vehicles do bring back trash and burn up in the atmosphere. But you can imagine living in your home, your 5-bedroom house if you have one, for 6 months and not being able to take out the trash. So things collect pretty quickly up there in space. Both the astronauts, crew supplies, their food containers, things such as that add up. Space is a premium up in space, no pun intended. So the ability to bring back trash and to burn it up and dispose of it is incredibly important, and that's what Cygnus offers NASA. So for the investment that the agency had in these two companies, both Orbital and SpaceX, NASA and its international partners now have two brand new cargo vehicles. SpaceX, obviously, starting back in 2006 with the COTS program, has now flown a few successful missions up to the International Space Station and has brought home quite a bit of science, including today. Orbital, which began in earnest in the program back in 2008, about 2 years behind SpaceX, now getting ready to fly its own missions beginning this April with a test flight. It'll have an actual demonstration mission of Cygnus, much like what SpaceX did, coming up later on this summer. And then hopefully we'll start flying actual cargo missions later on this year to help resupply the International Space Station. This is looking at the target on the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. This is what the crew looks at from the robotic workstation. You see the very tip end of the station's robotic arm there in the lower part of your screen. The SpaceX team in Hawthorne continuing to send commands up to Dragon to get it in the proper configuration for the release, which is coming up a little more than an hour and a half from now. The sun setting on the SpaceX Dragon vehicle and the International Space Station there as the two travel just to the south of Australia, about to make a pass over the Pacific Ocean. A team here in Houston going through several different processes to get ready for the release coming up in an hour and a half. They are making sure that the crew has the proper view on board the International Space Station and the robotics workstation, which you're seeing a live view of here. This is what Chris Hadfield and Tom Marshburn will be monitoring as they pull the trigger to release Dragon and send it on its way. Both the robotics officer here inside Mission Control and the visiting vehicle officer are feeding information to Flight Director Scott Stover. But activities here inside the flight control room beginning to ramp up as we get a little bit closer to this release point of this cargo vehicle as we bid it farewell and send it on its way for today's splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Again, that splashdown at 11:34 a.m. Central Time. But again, Scott Stover and his team will be on console today for the next few hours as they wrap up these activities. There is Stover there on the right, Kate Rubins there on the left. This is the Orbit 1 team. They've been here through the majority of the evening. Stover's call sign is Keystone Flight. Orbit 2's flight director will be Tomas Gonzalez Torres. He himself is a former EVA officer. He was responsible for the STS-125 flight. That was the final mission up to Hubble. He is now a flight director. His call sign is Lightning Flight.